Welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast, where each week we speak with brands, icons, innovators, and trailblazers within the fly fishing industry, exploring both the successes and failures they've encountered along the way to become who they are today. But first, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast or joined our email list, please do so by going to the flyfisherinsiderpodcast.com, or you can also find us on Instagram at Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. Now let's begin. Today's guests are Brian Niska and Geoff Perioway. Brian Niska works at the Skeena Spey Lodge in northern British Columbia. Brian has been a fly fisher for over 30 years and is a master casting instructor with the Federation of Fly Fishers and specializes in both single and double-handed rods. Brian is actively teaching casting clinics from the lodge on the famous Skeena River in northern British Columbia. Brian is an advocate for habitat restoration of wild fish stocks. Brian is also a longtime friend of Geoff Perioway's. Geoff is the owner and rod builder of the famed Perioway Rod company. Geoff started building his rods in his early teens, which has ultimately led him to the success of the Perioway Rod company in becoming a recognized and well-respected top rod builder within the industry. Perioway Rods is located in the heart of Canada's Rockies. However, Geoff's rods are recognized as premium rods both locally and internationally. Guys, welcome to the show.
Right on, Greg. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, super stoked to have you here. I know it's been a while. We've been trying to connect and whatnot, so let's just jump right into it. Geoff, can you give us a bit of your background about who you are?
Absolutely. So, Newfoundlander. I grew up in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, on the Humber River. So we were always chasing Atlantic salmon at a young age with my dad and my brother and later friends. And it was, I guess, the beginning of the whole addiction. I decided to get a little cluster of rods at 10, 12 years old, and ended up getting a little bit of tutelage from an older gentleman, and he got me sort of making on other blanks, and I really enjoyed it. So I kept on doing it. Went to college and continue on with normal jobs, and then decided to make the leap and develop my own brand around the year 2000. So it's been an interesting journey since then. We've got about 60 rods that we produce now, and over 6 different series of rods. So it's been quite a time.
And Brian, a little bit of your background.
You bet. I was always obsessed with fish since I was a little kid. Some of my earliest memories are my parents taking me fishing. This would be like 3-4 years old. I was never really that great at school, to be honest. So as soon as that was done with, I went off to be a ski instructor, and guiding fishing worked well with that because I was fishing anyway. So when I ended up in Whistler, which would have been about 1998, I decided the best thing would be to start my own business so I didn't have to work for anyone else. Started a company called Whistler Fly Fishing. We did a lot of guided trips, in the Whistler area throughout the summer, but our main gig was the spring, winter, and fall months when fishing was a lot better, and that fishing took place in Squamish. So, chasing winter steelhead in February, March, and April, and chasing sea run bull trout in the winter months, and some good salmon fishing in the fall. So after, maybe 12 years in Whistler, I ended up in Squamish for a bit to be close to the good fishing. And then an opportunity came around to relocate full-time up here in Terrace in northwestern BC, which was an area I was pretty familiar with. I mean, I was spending a good amount of time here, especially in the fall months, for the past decade. But to actually be up here for 12 months of the year is a real treat. And the irony is I actually find myself fishing less these days than I was back when I didn't live so close. But I mean, I live right on the river, so what the heck? Probably got 2 little kids, maybe that's why. But my specialty's always been teaching spey casting, though do a little bit of single hand still. And as the name suggests, our clientele up here is pretty much 100% spey casting, and the ones that aren't, we convert anyways. So that's what that's all about. And so far as our fishing goes at the lodge, we've got 10 acres right on the Skeena. We've got 10 cabins that we rent out, do a bunch of guiding. Our season runs from the beginning of March through till early May. That would be winter steelhead. Then we break for high water and get back at it for Chinook salmon in June, which turns into summer steelhead fishing. And the nice northern coho that we like to catch takes us right through till early November.
Nice. I love it. So now you guys actually knew each other for quite some time now. Is that correct?
Now, how we met at a fly fishing show in Calgary. Geoff had a rod company I'd never heard of, and I was doing casting demos, and a guy he had working for him at the time approached me and said, "Hey, what do you think of our rods?" And I was pretty honest about what I thought of them, and it wasn't bad. But I said, "Hey, here's something that if I had any input, I would do different." And a couple years later, we've got our own rod series, which is the metal detector series, and they've been, gosh, Geoff, what is it now? About 10 years?
I was trying to think about it today. I can't place it, but it has to be that long. Yeah, it was bringing back lots of memories.
So did you guys together come up with the metal detector, or like based on your conversations or your feedback?
So when we first started talking at the show, it was kind of funny. The show had ended almost, and Brian and I started talking. Our booths were still up, and everyone else had sort of left the arena. And I remember him saying, "I love your rods, but I did take a pair of scissors and chop them off." And what he had alluded to was that, the movement to this new Northwest style of fishing. So he was the originator of the metal detector, and submitted all the specs, and then we worked together. We came to market pretty quick. It was probably only 6 months before we had deliverable product, at least in our hands, that we were able to start playing with. And then it was not long after that we were to market. So it was a fun project.
Nice, I like it. What are you guys currently doing now together?
Oh, sure. We've, the metal detector was, we started out with three in the series, pardon me. So there was a 510 grain, 12-foot rod. This is a light steelhead rod, kind of a 7.5, 8 weight. It also finds itself in use on big trout streams with, chances at decent sized fish throwing big flies. And we, to supplement with that, we had a 400 grain switch rod. That's 10 foot, 5 inches. And, that's your classic trout stick that you could, swing flies casting two-handed, or you could overhead cast it if you wanted, stripping streamers, excels, and all that stuff. And then we had a big rod, which was purpose-built for my favorite fishing, which was Chinook salmon. And that rod is 13 foot 5 and is set up to throw a 720 grain Skagit head. Yeah. And you know what? We've from there, we started to broaden the field and fill in the blanks. And we followed that up with a 12 foot 10 rod that throws a 600 grain line. This is a pure 9 weight. And we've got a 14 footer that is almost a 10. And we've got a couple of different comp rods that we've used that would be closer to 11 or a 12. These would be at the 15 foot length. And most exciting, we've now got a new one coming out, or it's actually out already. And that's a 675 grain, 13 foot 3, I believe it. 3 came out. Yeah. Thank you, Geoff.
Yeah.
And that's a 6-piece.
It's very new.
Six-piece rod. Yeah. They're so new. We don't even have cases for them yet, but they're awesome. They do a lot of different things well. You can throw a longer line with them. They'll chuck a Skagit, of course. All of our weight designations are merely suggestions, and some people might go a little lighter, a little heavier, depending on what they're doing with it. So, as an example, that 12 foot 10 600, I fish a 575 on that. But when I get beginners, people who've never spey cast before, I start them out with a 625 on that. So, the better caster you are, the less weight you need to make the rod work, of course. So, with that in mind, that 675, if I was using that, this is the new one, the 6-piece. If I was using that out here in the summer for steelhead fishing, I'd probably actually run a 650 on it. If I was using that earlier on in the year for Chinook salmon, I probably want to throw a 725 on it. So the rod will do that, and depending on how big of a sink tip you're trying to deliver, you can back the weight off a little bit.
So I just want to ask you, for your rods, say one guy has one line, right? They just have one line. What line would you pair with that 6-piece, that new 6-piece that you guys have?
675 is going to be money.
675. Yeah, it's right in the middle. So that whatever the designation is in the middle, and you can typically go plus or minus 50 with no real adverse effects.
So that's the optimist choice then, or the ultimate choice for that line. So
yeah, something else I should touch on, Greg. So let's say you were a beginner here, never spey cast before. We're going to go out, and let's say it's the end of August, so you're up here on the Skeena trying to catch summer steelhead. If you were 6'2", or if you were 5'2", is greatly going to affect what line we put on there. So I'm going to add a bit of weight. So maybe I go to the 625. But if you're a little on the shorter side, I might start you with the Skagit short. So that would be like a 20-foot head. If you're a taller person, then you'd be in the the regular. And the reason for this is when you're standing in, 10 inches a foot of water, when the rod tip's in the firing position, I'm 6'2". My rod tip's going to be farther off the ground than Geoff Perioway's is because he's a little bit shorter. So the idea is really you customize the weight, but you also customize the head length a little bit to set people up for success. Because if you don't get that anchor turned, if your anchor isn't straight coming off the water, if your anchor's got any amount of curve to it, that's going to greatly affect the performance of the cast. So with all that being said, the truth of the matter is you can be 100 grains off on any line and still throw it no problem. But for optimum performance, start with our suggestions and make an adjustment depending on your casting experience and also your size.
No, I love it. Those are that's why you're the master instructor here in casting, right? That's definitely it for sure. So, what inspired you guys to go the route that you did in creating the rods together?
Well, for me, it was seeking performance, and when I talk to guys like Brian, we're getting intel right from the horse's mouth, So we're able to develop product around that, and that's the key. That's the absolute key. So, yeah, for us, the inspiration comes from these guys and all the users that give us the feedback, right?
Brian, do you have any follow up to that?
You bet. So basically, prior to hooking up with Geoff there to design the metal detector series, I was fishing a Scandinavian brand of rod a lot, and they were very light and very fast, and I liked that about them. But as a guy who made his living essentially telling people to slow down because most of the time people are casting too fast, I realized pretty quick that they were just doing what the rod was telling them to do. So a lot of times when you watch someone cast, it's obvious that they're casting too quickly. Maybe you hear a swoosh in the air, or you can just see it. And if you tell that person slow down, that's I guess okay advice, but you're not really helping them unless you can explain to them why they need to slow down, and they can understand that speed that you're seeing is actually an effect of a different problem. So every single person's natural reaction when they feel load, bend, leaving the rod is to add speed. And so what happens is if the rod's too stiff, when they come out of the turn at the back and they start to transfer everything forward, the rod's lost a considerable amount of the bend. So when load comes into the rod, the tip bends first and then the butt. When load leaves the rod, it leaves the butt first and then the tip. So essentially what happens with a really stiff rod is people are really just using the top end of the rod, and they end up having to rush the cast. And if you rush the cast, you don't allow the cast to develop to its full potential. So what we did with metal detector, and we kind of reverse engineered it. We started with what do we want the rod to look like when the forward stroke is at 12 o'clock? Because 12 o'clock is where maximum rod bend, maximum rod load would be. And we set up what we wanted the flex pattern of the rod to look like. And then we started to understand the problem with traditional rod. When I say traditional rod design, it's actually a wrong way to say it, because a lot of rods a long time ago were built this way, with this idea of being softer in the butt. But going back to when we started metal detector, the common hot spey rod of the day was quite a stiff thing with a really fast butt and a quick tip, and it was sort of instant gratification for bad casting, because if people added a little bit of speed, they felt like they were doing something. But really, they weren't getting the line speed they were hoping for, and they were having to put way too much of their own sweat equity into it. So with metal detector, you've got a softness between the where the reel sits and let's say the first or second stripping guide, so essentially the bottom piece. The rod's very stiff through the middle, and then up at the tip, let's say, depending on the rod length, but most of them it's about 11 inches, 12 inches of softer. And the last 4 inches of the rod is real soft. It almost feels like a mistake when you wiggle it. But when you keep everything under constant tension, what this helps do is it creates a balanced flex pattern. So when you come through 12 o'clock, you have the deepest possible bend and still allowing the tip to come directly over to the top in a straight line. Most people who have been fly casting a while know that if they want to throw a long way, they need line speed. And the way to get line speed is in loop shape. And when it comes to loop shape, the loop is always going to be formed by the path of the rod tip as it accelerates. So you want a rod flex pattern that allows that tip to come through as straight as can be and hold a bend as deep as possible. So when we're spey casting and we create load in the sweep, so it doesn't matter what spey cast you're doing, the sweep is the portion of the cast where load is created. You're going to lose a portion of that load as you transition into the forward cast. But by keeping the butt of the rod soft And having that balanced flex pattern, you don't need to add speed early to keep that bend in the rod. Remember, everyone's natural reaction when they feel the rod unloading is add speed. The rod stays loaded. As you come through 12 o'clock and it's time to work your bottom hand, it's like a darn slingshot. It's unbelievable because you wiggle it, you go, man, this is really, really kind of bendy feeling. That's not what I'm used to. But when you slow down and you cast properly, the amount of line speed you can get out of it is absolutely nuts.
I love it. I love it. You know what? That actually just answers my next question. You know, I was going to ask you guys like how your rods cast and feel in comparisons to say that of a bigger mass produced brand, but I think that just kind of sums it up. But is there anything else, Geoff, that you would follow up with that?
Yeah, I mean, in lieu of that, I guess what I could say is that when let's rewind back to when we tackled this project, we had not seen anything like it. You know, it was all brand new. You know, you get a guy who submits, a half dozen tapers to you, and you look at every one and go, we don't have anything like it. I don't think the market has anything like it, you know. And so as we start going through testing, we start seeing that. I mean, I can't comment on the other brands because I don't cast them. I just haven't gotten enough exposure to that. But I do know that maybe there's some similarities now, but at the time it was definitely cutting edge, and I think continues to be.
No, for sure. Where do you guys make the rods? Can you describe where you make it?
Yeah, you bet. So we deal with a Korean partner, and they're unbelievable at what they do. I had an earlier partner when I first started this game. I had been working with a different factory. We made a move maybe about 4 years in, and now we're with a real solid group there. So we have two different types of offerings. We have what we call our factory model, which is your run-of-the-mill one that we produce that we think is ideal specs. But of course, we see everything. We see people with troubled shoulders. We see people that have odd dimensions. So I spend a great deal of my time doing a lot of custom work, where we'll develop ergonomics around that user or that angler. So yeah, it's sort of two offerings, and we have a fully functioning shop here in Calgary where we have really good lathe turners and make our own reel seats, our own handles. It's fun stuff.
Nice. I heard a rumor that you started off making them in the back of your car. Or you have a little shop down on Brian's property, right by the river there.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, you're right. Living in a van down by the river, I made it.
That's funny. I like it. Yeah. I like it. So would you say the metal detector is definitely your most popular model?
Oh, sure. We've been producing that for quite a number of years. And so, yeah, the cumulative effect of that, I think if we have more metal detectors on the market than any other one. We were trying to think a while ago which one, and it sort of splits hairs over the season. You know, sometimes we're seeing more 510s and then 720s. They're all pretty popular.
For sure. Now, you know, you're a brand, you're starting off. What were you guys struggling with earlier on?
Ooh. Well, we know this is a business that was built from the ground up. So every system had to be built. When we had the first 10 rods on the market, it was a different struggle than when we had 500, and that's a different than we have a 5,000. So for us, it was systems, put systems in place that allow us to track things. Of course, warranty is a huge thing. It's a huge part of our business. So making sure that's streamlined and properly done. We see every kind of incident you can imagine, and they're all unique, and they all need to be helped. So I spend a good deal of my time talking to the customers and getting the systems in place to make sure that it's streamlined to get their parts back to them. So like any company, I'm sure they had their struggles.
Right.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because watching Geoff's business change since when I first met him, and you know, when you go to these trade shows and you look at the list of who the exhibitors are, they're often pretty familiar. And so Perioway Rod Company, and what struck out to me is he didn't have one booth. I think he had like 3 booths. So he had like a bigger presence there at this Calgary show than the big names did. So I was kind of, okay, what's this all about? And then watching his business grow and understanding where it came from. And it might be urban legend, but the way it was explained to me is that Perioway got his start by hanging out literally down by the Bow River and like those dog walking parks where people go to fish and selling rods to people out of the back of his car and teaching and fighting the good fight, putting fly rods in the hands of new anglers and, teaching them how to cast and such. And then from there, obviously it grew pretty much organically. One thing I watched him do that I thought was pretty cool is in the early days as his business was really growing, I think he wanted to kind of keep up with the Joneses. So he was like, man, I got to have reels. Makes sense, right? Everybody who buys a rod probably needs a reel. So he kind of dabbled in reels, and they weren't bad, but they weren't exceptional. And to me, they kind of muddied the brand. I mean, it's a rod company, and the strength of it is if you call up the Perioway Rod Company, you're probably like pretty much all the time going to be talking to Geoff. You just can't get that in most places. And, talking about the custom program, if someone wants 5 different colors on their rod wraps, if somebody wants a short handle or a long handle, or, they want to, sauce the rod up a little bit with expensive fittings, Geoff will definitely build to suit, or you can get the exact same blank, already processed with the traditional metal detector getup, for a little bit less money. But to have that custom option is pretty cool. And we take that a step further out here in Terrace because Geoff's literally got a rod shop about 45 feet from the Skeena River here on the bank, overlooking our boat launch. And, he can walk down the hill from there to our dock and make some test casts with stuff in literally like 30 seconds. So I think that from idea to production is pretty quick with us. And also, thinking about, folks who want something a little bit more custom, having the ability to come to the lodge, cast a bunch of different rods right after each other, be in the rod shop and get your thing dialed. That's pretty cool. One last point that I think is also a strength, and certainly when I was in retail, this was an annoying thing for me, is you get these companies that have like 300 different SKUs, and then someone breaks a rod and that rod's not in production anymore. And every couple of years they're changing coming up with new rods. The truth of the matter is there hasn't been any major developments in graphite technology in the last decade, aside from a little bit on the durability end. So from a casting performance standpoint, everybody's got pretty good access to the same material. And what I love about what Geoff's doing is he doesn't discontinue rods. If a rod's in the line, the rod's in the line. And that means that down the road, you're going to be able to get a part for it if you step on it. What does change, and certainly this has happened with metal detector, is slight tweakings of the way the rod's finished, meaning we've switched to better cork, or we've changed to a different thread to address a little bit of fading. So it's kind of like an open project. If we can find ways to improve your metal detector 510 and the way it's set up, then the 2020s are hopefully going to be slightly improved cosmetically from the 2017s. But the blank is going to be consistent throughout, so we could always wrap up, a new piece to match your 7-year-old rod. So there.
I kind of always, I guess, just felt it, but as I run the company, I understand now more so that these rods have soul, and people don't just want a rod back; they want their rod back, or their dad's rod back, or their granddad's rod back, and so we sort of we put Humpty Dumpty back together all the time. And if for me, I've solved my long-term problem, which was being able to put people back on the river, and that's been the absolute key. It's so important. People come in 10 years later.
No, you nailed it, right? People do want, that's exactly what they want. They want their rod back, the one that there's an emotional connection with, of course, right? And if you're able to give them that back, I don't want this year's model because because 3 years ago I bought a rod and you discontinued it. Now I got to get this year's model. I want the rod that I have memories of my biggest fish caught on, or this, or whatever it is, right? Or that gift that was given to me by my wife. So that's the emotional aspect. And if you guys are able to provide that, man, I mean, that's a home run right there in itself, like you say, right? So.
That's not to say that we're not coming out with new models and we're not trying to develop new things as we move forward. More recently, we've come out with the Renegade series. It's an exciting new project also. So there's that. There's 6-piece rods. There's all kinds of different things, but that doesn't mean that we need to destroy what we've already developed.
100% agree. Can you touch base on the Renegade series? This is news to me.
Well, Renegade is another project that we've done in conjunction with Jerry French, and it's a similar thing. It's just taken, I think, taken the rod size down even further again. So now we're making, arguably the shortest spey rods in the world, 8.5 foot 3 weights, 9 foot 4 weights, 9.5 foot 5 weights. So really true trout spey. So that's been another exciting project, and there's another example of how we're continuing trying to listen to anglers and to listen to top industry folk and develop product, but not at the detriment of our prior work.
I hear you. So are these new trout spays, are they is it a relatively new concept that you guys are doing or working on, or has it been around for a while? I've never heard of that size rod.
Well, as the lines get shorter, it allows us to do more, to explore more options. So I believe the lines continue to drive the work that we do, and of course anglers are continuing to drive line development. So it's just a sort of a symbiotic relationship that we all share.
Awesome. I love it. You know what? I just want to why do you guys feel you're so successful in the niche where others have failed, and you guys are doing this? Why do you think that is?
Let me answer that one. Let me answer that one for you, Geoff. I think the strength of Perioway is literally what we touched on before. Everything's reverse engineered from a fishery. So talking about Jerry French's Renegade series, Jerry's a huge fan. I like short rods. Jerry likes even shorter rods, short lines. And it comes from a lifetime of guiding and recognizing that this is easier tackle for people to fish on the waters that Jerry wants to fish in the way that Jerry wants to fish. So it's very, very specialized. It's not meant to be, exactly and familiar like something that you've been fishing from another brand. You pick up a Renegade and you're like, whoa, this is like a little single hander, but it bends and it wants to cast. The thing throws itself. So if you look at the Perioway lineup for a moment, and we've talked a lot about metal detector because obviously that's the
our project together.
Yeah, it's also, I think, when Geoff really made a strong move into the spey market. Previous to this, he had a
Element series,
broad series called the Element. I knew that, Geoff. I was getting there. Elements are a little bit longer. Overall, they're bendy. They feel nice. They're great in the hands of a beginner. They're great in the hands of somebody who wants to fish a dry line, especially a slightly longer dry line. But you're talking about, I believe it's a 13.5 foot 7 weight, whereas, in the metal detector series, your 7 weight is a 7.5, 8. It's a 12 footer. And in the Renegade series, you're down at 11 feet. So that sort of gives you the idea of the progression. There's another series that they've got called the X Spey. And this predates Sage's X Spey by quite a bit. And that particular rod is a little bit more towards what you would expect out of the European market, something towards underhand style casting, and also fishing a lot of Scandi heads. Not to say it won't do a Skagit, but you got to be careful because it's deceiving. You take a metal detector, you wiggle it, and you go, okay, well, it feels soft to me, but we're going to put a 600 grain line on it. Then you take the X Spey, which feels way stiffer, and you go, oh, well, actually, this is going to work better with like a 525, even though essentially the two rods are the same size. And that's because the X Spey isn't designed to hold a load all the way to the cork throughout the entire cast. The X Spey is designed for a really short, quick delivery, but will do everything pretty well. You can throw a long belly line on an X Spey. You can throw a Skagit head. It'll do it all. And that's where the X originally came from. Like X marks the spot, whatever you want it to be, it'll do it. And then now the Renegade is, to me at least, the Renegade is very much a Skagit stick. Certainly, especially at those lengths, you wouldn't be trying to throw a longer line on it. But, it solves a particular problem, which is delivering a short, heavy sink tip and a substantial fly with a short line, getting it down to the fish quick. It's a tremendous tool for the job. And that idea of collaboration, I think, has been part of the Perioway story through the beginning. Certainly, that's what got me there. Yeah, and obviously, Jerry's a incredibly experienced steelhead guide. Why wouldn't you want to collaborate with him?
Yeah, I mean, up to the time that I met Brian, and then on further now with Jerry and doing all this work, I was an Atlantic salmon guy. We were casting floating lines with number 10 hooks. No sinking at all. We could on rivers that don't have any trees around them, kind of stuff. So, it was a different game. So let's do what was needed, and being able to put that through to engineering is the cornerstone of what we're able to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like it. So, hey, you know what, Geoff, I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for someone that's out there thinking they're going to build a rod or wanting to start a rod building business, like any roadblocks or anything that they should avoid?
Yeah, you betcha. That's such a good question. And I tell you, we spend a lot of time helping people out. And I encourage anybody to please reach out to me if you're going down this path. It's a wonderful path, and there's room for everybody. We train every week in our shop here in Calgary people how to make reel seats, how to make handles, how to install, hints, tips, tricks, how to wrap your guides, how to be efficient at this and that, and all other things. So yeah, it's a big part of our business is to supply that market. It's a great way to build up a little cluster of rods if it's just on a passion level, and it's certainly easy to make some gas money if you wanted to get into it a little bit more serious. But quite frankly, your role is going to be no different than mine. It's going to be listening to the angler, figuring out exactly what their fishing is, and then building equipment around that. So it's a wonderful thing.
Oh, awesome. I love it. What other services do you guys offer?
Well, we sell a lot of blanks. We sell a lot of cork. We sell a lot of reel seat. We make all the reel seats here, so people are always on the lookout for fancy seats, and so we're making rod building components, kits, you name it. So yeah, that's not a small part of our business for sure.
Okay, awesome. Brian, how does the rod company, besides the guests being able to try the rods while at the lodge, how else does the rod company tie into the lodge itself?
You bet. Well, teaching people spey casting is a key part of our business, and having equipment that casts well when people do what they're supposed to do properly is a real bonus. Sometimes folks will show up with rods that aren't that great or mismatched equipment, and you don't want to tell someone, hey, your setup's awful. So you kind of have to be like, oh, hey, why don't you just try a couple casts with this? And over time, because the rod's set up properly, it rewards good casting technique. And as I touched on earlier, one of the challenges is if you have someone who's got a rod that's too stiff and say a line that's too light, they have to cast fast to make it work. And the rod's not working the way it's supposed to. It's really noisy. You can hear it. They're not getting good performance. They're working too hard. But it's rewarding. The rod is essentially rewarding bad behavior, whereas metal detector in particular, but any good casting rod that's balanced with the right line, will reward good casting technique. And so with that being said, our access to equipment and the full process, guests can, if Geoff's around, and he's up here 4 or 5 times a year, if Geoff's around, guests can go back into the rod shop and learn a little bit about rod building. And I think that, just like fly tying enhances your experience as an angler, being able to build your own equipment or maintain or repair your own equipment, I think that gives you a greater level of appreciation for the activity as a whole, rather than just being hyper focused on, did I catch a fish? So with that being said, I think having the rod shop here and having our connection with Perioway and the ability for guests sometimes to get the opportunity to cast prototypes, we're constantly getting prototypes made of different stuff. As an example, these 6-piece rods, we had guests here this past season who got to fish ones. Now, a lot of those rods didn't actually end up getting built yet, but they helped bring us to the point of where we are now with the current model. So I think the guests really enjoy being part of that process, and certainly, the ability for them to travel light and not worry about bringing equipment because we've got it here. I think that's a very attractive thing for them.
I like it. Do guests usually buy the rods right then and there from you guys at the lodge, or?
You bet. We do end up selling a lot of equipment. What's interesting is the one we seem to sell the most of is actually the light stuff, meaning folks come here, they fish for steelhead, they use the steelhead gear, but most of the fly fishing in this world is not for steelhead. The majority of it's for trout. Mm-hmm. So people are like, hey, I'd love to get that 400, that switch rod, and try it on my trout stream back in Montana, stuff like that.
So you guys are both killing it in the fly fishing world. Like, where do you both get your best ideas from?
Oh, well, killing is probably a pretty strong word. Surviving is probably more accurate.
Yeah.
By listening to people and paying attention to what's going on. It's really hard to buy a bad fly rod these days. The equipment's come so far. But I think your best ideas are always going to be progression of ideas that you're already working on. It's very unusual to have something just come completely out of the blue, and that all comes back to time on the water. And time on the water doesn't necessarily mean just fishing. Time on the water is probably more valuable to us when it's in the position of casting instructor or guide, sitting back watching. A good caster can make anything work, but looking at where people have success and the changes that you make to help enable that success, that I think is the real strength of what you're doing when you're trying to help someone with their casting or working as a guide and observing their casting.
You touched base about casting, right? And walk me through how, if I'm new to fly fishing, I come up to the lodge and you're going to show me a casting clinic. What am I expecting here? Walk me through that.
Oh man, so let's say you came up for 3 nights and 2 days, which is a common short trip, right? We get folks that are here for 3 weeks, but for most folks, it's about the time off. And the nice thing with Terrace is it's really easy to get here. You sit in a chair from Vancouver for an hour and 25 minutes, and you're at the airport here in Terrace. We pick you up at the airport. It's 15 minutes out here to the river. Let's say you arrived at the lodge midday. We'd pick you up at the airport. We'd feed you lunch. I always try and get people on the water ahead of their first day of casting whenever possible. Make sure the waders don't leak. Allow people to hit the ground running. A little bit of casting instruction. If they're beginners, it's easy. If they're experienced spin casters with no fly fishing experience, that can be a little challenging. And if they're experienced single handers, that also can be a little bit tricky. But all that being said, we're talking about a half an hour to 45-minute investment in your future. And boom, you're spey casting and fishing efficiently. And by efficiently, I mean you're not beating up your shoulder. Most people don't know this, but tennis elbow is rampant in the fly casting world. Bad technique will lead you towards tennis elbow. Bad technique will lead you to a sore lower back, sore shoulders, a sore neck. Good technique means the whole body is working within the cast. A good spey cast starts at your feet. You move the big joints, and then you work the small joints. So what I mean by that is when I'm in the sweep, I'm using the turn of my hip to help develop the power. As I come through, I'm resetting my shoulder. The last thing that's going to happen is I'm going to use my hands and a bit of wrist. If I do the hands and the wrist first, I can't come through with the hip later and have any effect. And any time that your hands are too far out to one side, you're compensating on something. So good casting is from a balanced position, meaning the hands really don't move too much. They stay pretty stable. It's a slight weight transfer and the turning of the hips and the shoulders that deliver the power. The hands hold on to the rod, and as the rod's unloading, which is what's going to happen when the rod stops accelerating, that's when the hands come into it. And if you're doing it right, Greg, you're going to feel that the bottom hand does most of the work. And your only way you're going to feel that is if you're patient with your power application. If you've taken a lesson from me, you've probably heard me say no power before midnight. What I'm saying to you is don't move your hands until you come through 12 o'clock. Use your body to get the rod to the fully loaded position at 12 o'clock. And then when you finish off from there, it's easy to activate the bottom hand. If you try and apply too much power too quickly, so essentially if you're a right-handed caster, you're back behind your right ear, you're not going to be able to have much effect with your bottom hand. The only way you're going to be able to activate your bottom hand is if the top hand is overtaking it as you come through 12 o'clock. So once again, no power before midnight. Be patient with your power application. If you're hearing a lot of rod noise, especially if it's real loud, you're applying the power too soon. It should feel effortless.
No, I agree. I hear you. So, you know what, Geoff, I haven't forgotten about you. How are you surviving in the fly fishing industry, and where do your best ideas come from?
Well, I think the day I retire in this business, I'll be working in the warranty department still. So that's definitely where I get my best ideas. I like to say I've seen it all, but there's, I'm sure, more that I'll get to see. But I learn a lot from that, and that's why we have a no-fault warranty program. I want to know how did it come to be broken, whether it was a dog chewing on the cork handle or whether it was broken mid-cast. So it's important for us to get that kind of feedback. So we get a lot of our best ideas from seeing our handles after 10 years, seeing how cork how the guides are handling the wear and tear of textured lines. I mean, it's an ongoing thing. So I've already alluded, of course, on listening to my guys and all the anglers that are out there that are giving us that feedback. Of course, that's invaluable. But the War Department seems to really illustrate that pretty well.
What's inspiring you guys to push forward in the industry?
Whew. Inspiration. Where do we drive our inspiration, Brian?
You know what? I think it's nice to build things and seeing an idea move through to a deliverable product is very satisfying. And having a concept and being able to massage that concept to the point where you're like, okay, this is pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. Let's put this in other people's hands and see where it goes. But then that's not the end of the process, because then that's when you really get the good feedback is, okay, I can make this work good for me. And that's why I love giving a prototype to a student and say, here, let's see what you do with this. And it really has over time allowed us to, I think, come up with a series of rods that are easy casting and will deliver incredible high line speed with very little effort for people.
Geoff, anything else?
For me, some days are worse than others. And what it seems like when you're in those days, you get a note from a customer that'll give you just a touch about their experience. And it's so rewarding to see these things. I often say I'd like to be my rods, because they're the ones that go out and have all the fun. I get to see that through the emails and the tidbits that come through to me and the little text messages. We share that. You break your rod and you're crying on the beach. I'm the one you call. So it's fun to be a part of that, and I think it's what inspires me.
I always ask my guests what something is that they would change within the fly fishing community or industry. And Geoff, what would you change?
You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll say it, Frank. I just alluded to what inspires me, but I think that can be taken too far when we're trying to take pictures to either make Geoff proud or to take multiple pictures in multiple angles for social purposes. I think that's a symbiotic relationship that I have with my anglers that I tend to I'd like to see curtailed to some degree. Like I said, it is symbiotic, and we do want to share. But I think we're all living in a pretty realistic world that we need to protect the resource. So it's a challenge. Ironically,
that's one of my pet peeves as well, for sure.
Well, it's a cultural thing, right? And it's us. As rod companies, we can choose to change the fabric of the culture by dissuading or having those customer conversations and trying to dissuade certain behaviors. If we're rewarding those types of things, then of course we're going to see more of them. So
yeah, I agree.
So it's a cultural issue.
I agree. Brian, what would you change?
Greg, I don't know if I'd really change anything. I like the direction things are going. I think, things like the Keep 'em Wet movement have really, helped initiate a change toward keeping fish better and an awareness of our impact as anglers. And I think that's actually an important thing moving forward, is that, anglers need to understand their own impact and, take steps to A, reduce it, and B, be okay with it. And what I mean by that is, take something like catching a lot of fish. How many do you need to have a good day? There is a catch and release mortality. It does exist. And the more you catch, the greater you're contributing to it. So I think understanding that it's okay to not have your fly in the water all the time, and it's okay to walk away from a run without catching every last fish, I think that's important. And as Geoff said, I think understanding your impact online too, like, posting fish pictures very quickly after you caught them in recognizable locations will typically, lead to more people fishing those locations at that time. So I just think it's important to always be, taking a bit of an inventory of how you feel your impact is, and certainly steps like keeping fish in water, obviously following regulations, and maybe looking at when you're fishing and where you're fishing, meaning, are you fishing a summer run Steelhead River, but it's December and these fish are not fresh? So trying to concentrate your fishing efforts in areas where, fish are fresh and limiting your impact. I think that's all good news if we're going to be able to keep doing this.
No, for sure. Definitely. So yeah, it's funny how the social media aspect plays a huge role in fishing nowadays, and the conservation aspect of, like, holding a fish out of water for 10 minutes just to try and get that perfect angle and the right lighting. And I know we have filters and all that, but like, or, getting three people to all pose with that fish. One person caught the fish. So, so it's kind of frustrating. I know I've seen that quite a bit, but it's, making sure we're smart with how we do it going forward, so there's a better industry.
Greg, I got to say though, it's a lot better than it used to be. Even going back 10 years ago, the standard fish hold is a lot closer to the water, if not in the water. And I think everybody will agree that the most captivating fishing photos aren't grip and grins. They're shots where it looks like the angler is not even aware their picture's being taken. And, it's just a cultural thing. I think nowadays everyone feels like they need to document stuff. I want to share what I think is a funny story really quickly with you.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So at our lodge here, everybody ends up being an angler pretty much. And last year, our sous chef, who is new to BC, new to fly fishing, certainly new to steelhead fishing, he kind of got the bug. And just before he had to go back to Quebec, he went out to the river and he was all by himself, which is a big deal. When you go fishing with someone else and they're kind of showing you the ropes, that helping you land fish, that's one thing. But, it was a solo mission, and I'll be darned, he didn't hook a heck of a fish. And he was so excited, and he needed to document this. So he's got this fish in close. And so what does he do? As a typical millennial, he pulls out his cell phone and he's trying to film the thing just as the fish decides to go, and he loses the fish. And it's all on video. And I thought, man, that's a teachable moment. This kid is not going to forget this. And the next time he has, a fish that he's worked really hard to connect with, he's not going to make the mistake of pulling out his phone just so he can prove to everybody else that he had that encounter. So I think, that's going to be a cultural shift over time, I think, towards less photos as you develop as an angler. And it's certainly not my position, I think, to look down on anybody for how many fish photos they post, because, that's a personal choice. But I just think it's a natural thing to just being okay with the fact that you're out there doing it.
No, I agree. I do love looking at fish photos online as well. I know if anyone has a tip out there how to take the perfect solo fish selfie, I'm definitely interested. So, all right, guys. It's been a blast today, guys. Both Geoff and Brian for sure. Hey, you know what? Where can we find you guys at?
Man, I why not phone? Phoning is so good. We can have rich conversations, but email's great. There's lots of places to get advice. Brian is obviously a great resource. Jerry. So there's lots of people around that can give you a real good handle on what we're up to.
So Geoff, we can go to your website and just drop an email there.
Absolutely.
What's your website again?
PeriowayRods.com.
And just ask for Geoff.
Go there and yeah, you bet.
Awesome.
I probably will answer by saying hello, Geoff here.
Instagram handle, Geoff?
Perioway Rod Company, I think is what it find me as.
Perfect. And Brian?
You bet. So online, you can find our website, though it's kind of an old bit in need of a redo website, but it's located at skeenaspey.com and skeenaflyfishing.com. If you want to check in with us on Instagram, it's at Skeena Spey Fishing. What we try and do with our Instagram is just present balanced content. Sure, there's some grip and grins there, but we also basically try and show you what the lodge experience is all about. And as much as possible, you'll find that the timing of the content's pretty varied, meaning it's March, but I'm posting October photos. But I'm with Geoff. I think the best thing is, if you're interested in learning more, just give me a shout. You can get a hold of me at 1-888-822-3474. That's 1-888-822-3474, or info@skeenaspey.com.
Awesome. And you know what? I know you guys have both come together today for this amazing offer and deal for our listeners. Do you want to tell them what that is?
You bet. Well, actually, Greg, we'd love to have you up here. So I was thinking, let's do a podcast thing, and maybe we could even talk about when the folks are up here. You could do an episode then. But it's a school for two people. It's a 3-night, 2-day stay at the lodge here. Doesn't include alcohol, doesn't include fishing licenses, but everything else is taken care of. Greg will be in the boat with you, and we're gonna, regardless of your ability, we're gonna tune up your spey casting, get you started. All equipment's provided, and you're going to get to take home a brand new 6-piece Perioway rod. And who knows, maybe Geoff will be up here at the time. We have a little bit of flexibility on the timing of the trip. It could take place anytime this summer within the availability that we have. and the price of that for 2 people is going to be $5,400 Canadian plus tax.
Wow, that's an awesome deal. I love that. So let's make that happen. Let's get that out there. So, all right, guys, thanks a lot for being on the show today.
Hey, right on, Greg. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.